Harvest Losses webinar series. Can I kindly ask everyone to please turn off their cameras and keep their mics turned off? I will keep repeating this. I hope it doesn't annoy anyone, but it's just to
That's my
make
only
sure.
requirement. They have to sell.
Yeah, so this is the issue. Please, can we have everyone mute their mics, please? So we have a smooth session today. Thank you. When a speaker is called upon, he or she will unmute their mics and turn their cameras on, but only one speaker at a time should please have their mics on and the cameras on. Thank you. Please note that this webinar is recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel at the end of the session. My name is Chidima Azike, and I'm the project manager at the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria. The Association of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria is a central organization for commerce abroad and has representative offices in Lagos and in Abuja. Sorry, I think my screen is freezing a bit. 1 second. Okay, there we go. Yes. So the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria, together with its commercial affiliate DGIC International Business Services Limited, supports German and Nigerian companies in fostering their business relations through their extensive network and expertise. DGIC has been in Nigeria for 41 years, and like I said, we have our offices in Lagos and Abuja. We currently have the following competence centers. We have the business development, energy and environment, innovation and startups, skills development, agribusiness, of course, marketing and finance, and administration. We have gone into various projects this year. We have the Agri-Food Trade Fair, which took place in March this year. There's another one coming up next year in March as well. We have the Agricultural TVT Conference. We have the Post-Harvest Losses webinar, which we're on right now. We have the food and nutrition security training, we have the education trips, and we have our cashew project. So the post-harvest losses webinar has looked through the following value chains this year: cocoa, grains, cashew, soya beans, maize, fruits and vegetables, sesame seeds, and today we're looking at cassava. So the webinar series takes place every first Wednesday of the month, and this year we've been focused on post-harvest losses and how to mitigate these losses. This webinar is the 9th edition of the Post-Harvest Losses webinar, organized by the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce and supported by the SDG Market Building Initiative by GIZ. So I'm going to call on Gabriel Oluwaseun Adebayo from the SDG Market Building Initiative GIZ. He'll speak to us briefly about who they are and what they do. Gabriel, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Stella, for this wonderful opportunity once again, and good morning, everyone. So, if you permit me, I would love to share my screen real quick. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So SDG Market Building is an initiative for investment promotion for green tech solution in agriculture in Africa. So currently we're in Nigeria and Kenya. So I would like to just run everyone through what we do in SDG Market Building. So what is SDG Market Building? SDG Market Building promotes investment in sustainable green tech solution such as irrigation, post-harvest mechanization, and agrivoltaics. So it aims at stimulating the Nigerian market for related technology to increase private sector contribution to the global goals. We all know the whole SDG goals. So in particular, we are focusing on goal 2, which is zero hunger. We are focusing on goal 9, which is innovation. And we are focusing on goal 13, which is climate action. So how do we go about our work? So what we do is we identify businesses, SMEs in agribusiness in Nigeria, be it agro-food processors. So we drive a business, we draft investment dossier for them. Then we try to support the business through our effective and climate tech solutions. And we also match make businesses with service provider and tech provider. And we do not finance, so we only give access to finance. We do not finance any project by ourselves, but we do all the other aspects of the project development at no cost to the project owner or to the business owner. And this is being contributed to by it's been commissioned by the BMZ. That's the German Ministry of Economics and Commerce for development. So our target group are the medium-sized farms, producers, like I mentioned earlier, large agricultural output processing facility. We are looking at farmer cooperative, unions, aggregation level. They were looking at medium and large-scale licensed warehouses in Nigeria. So like I mentioned earlier, we have presence in Kenya and Nigeria, focusing on these technologies that I've already mentioned, which are irrigation, post-harvest mechanization, and agrivoltaics. So agrivoltaics is a new technology which actually comprises of dual use of land. So we are trying to bring this into the country to actually help us reduce our land management issue when it comes to agriculture and food production. So what do? I mentioned that earlier. We identify local businesses. We prepare we do a business assessment for you. We develop a project for you, and we link the project to a suitable finance. And we also have a matchmaking platform called Leverage, where we actually upload any opportunities to actually matchmake any project that we have at hand with a possible service or tech provider. So I will encourage everyone on this call to actually look through the Leverage platform. I will paste the link on the portal, on the chat portal very soon. Everyone can go there, look at it. If there's any opportunity in agribusiness that they are willing, to develop, or if there's any proposal that they're willing to drop, is open for everybody to just go there and probably look for opportunity and work with our project. So these are the projects that we've already listed on Levis. We have some in Kenya, and we have like few here in Nigeria as well. So the contact person for SDG Market Building is myself, Adebayo Oluwaseun Gabriel. My email is displaying on the screen, and you can also reach out to my colleague, Zainab Aliyu Dante. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Over to Stella. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Gabriel. Okay, so a few session rules before I call on our speakers. During the presentation by speakers, kindly use the chat box function at the bottom to ask your questions, and the Q&A session will be at the end of both speakers' presentations. With us today, we have two industry leaders speaking on cassava production and processing challenges faced and what solutions are available to mitigate these losses within this value chain. Please note that this webinar is recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel, so please share it with your colleagues. The presentation slides will also be sent to all participants at the end of the session. And now to our first speaker for today. Wayne Ribo, she is the co-founder of Seeds Services Limited. She'll be sharing her experience with cassava production and processing. Wayne, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Stella. Stella, can you please confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll just wait. So let me do a brief introduction before we go into, I hope that 15 minutes. Cassava value chain is a deep one, but I'll share as much as I can in 15 minutes. Yeah, my name is Wendy, co-founder of Seed Services. Is an agribusiness company focused on supporting women in the cassava processing and female smallholder farmers. So what we wanted to do at the beginning of our business is there are 5 crops that we identified that we wanted to be a part of, one of which is cassava. But in order to be able to deploy capital in the right part of the value chain, we knew that we had to conduct research along the entire cassava value chain line. And so what we did was went into the entire process from the beginning till the end. So a lot of the things that I'll be sharing today will come out of that, the research that we did and some of the results that have led us to where we are today as a company. Still, I'm not sure what's going on, but I can't see the slides.
It's there. If you can take control, then you can share it yourself.
It's not even up, so I can't see the control buttons.
Gabriel, can you see the slides, please?
Yes, I can, but the slide is not moving. I can see the slide.
Okay, let me reshare it. Can you see it now?
It's just moving.
Yes. Yes.
Wayne, can you see it?
Yep, it's rolling. Okay, you know what? I don't know what, maybe probably network from my end, but it's just rolling and I can't see. There's just that thing rolling.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see the slide on my own end, as in you're on slide 2 right now, showing the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Probably it's your network.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So do you want to maybe just,
okay, so you know what, let me just speak to it, and you can just help me be clicking from your end, right? So for the agenda today, I'll be talking briefly about lessons and where we currently so like I said, we're a gender-focused development company, providing Nigerian women in agribusiness with the opportunity to earn, learn, and grow. Earn in the sense that we want to be able to understand the value chain, to be able to increase their capacities to produce more, and in that sense, to earn more. Learn because we understand that to be able to improve the capacities of these women, they need to be equipped with the right level of knowledge, to be able to, deploy that into their businesses to increase, whatever it is that they're doing, and grow, because at the end of the day, by the time you earn and learn, your business grows, and that's the entire process that we've used to support the women that we've worked with so far. We want to be able to give women the necessary tools and information to support not just their agribusiness, but also their farming, which is the production end of it, and better equip them to make informed decisions about their businesses. So far, we've managed to run this with a very lean team. I'm co-founder and CEO.
Wayne, can you hear me? Your network is breaking.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
Your network is breaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we also have legal. We have an admin officer. We have a field operations officer and a farm manager. So like I said, our company goals, we're focused on supporting women to learn, earn, and grow. And what we saw at the beginning was we first of all decided to, what are the issues that these women are being faced with? First thing is limited access to funding. Some don't even have access to funding at all. Another issue that we saw was that they have inadequate business skills and support network. And then the largest issues that we saw was the defective distribution channels and, of course, fast exposure of their businesses. And so what we did was to design a series of support for them which came in solution of microcredit lending. However, for smallholder female farmers, we do not give cash. So microcredit lending will come in form of product loans, right? We also launched an accelerator program for women in agribusiness who've been working between 1 to 3 years to be able to equip them with better information, give them access to, better line of production equipment, and support them in other ways. Also to build a community around them to support themselves. We also designed some solutions around access to marketing and distribution, and of course, capacity building for both smallholder female farmers and women in agribusiness. So far, we've worked with a total of 617, or we are working with a total of 617 smallholder female farmers. Initially, this number was supposed to be just women, but if you know the intricacies of dealing with community in Nigeria, you know that you can't, there's a lot of these things that you can't do without getting the men involved. We've cultivated a total of 416 hectares, supported 30 agribusiness processing women so far. We've also cultivated just cassava. There are a few other crops that we are interested in, but we decided to start with the cassava value chain. One of the things that we've also done, because we partnered with AFEX on our journey, is also to aggregate crops, and this usually happens towards the end of the year. So far, we've aggregated maize, sorghum, and cassava as well. Our farming communities are spread between the northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria, and we've been able to work presently in about 5 states. So for our farm service delivery model, what we've done is, the first thing we do is, community mapping. We visited quite a number of communities across the northern and, mostly, and the south, which is Delta State, to be able to determine what, community we want to work with, to see what is available in those communities, lowest hanging fruit opportunities in those communities, and how, how collaborative these communities can be, and if we already have partners who are working within those communities that we can work with. And of course, that led us to research and community engagements, just getting a sense of where these communities are in their, cassava processing or production, to see where we could come in. After that, we had to do a land mapping to see the land that was available, if it was something that we could do, if it was larger than us or not. And then, of course, cluster mapping. I think this was one of the most important parts of it. We knew that we couldn't work with these farmers individually, and so we grouped them into clusters, which is kind of like a cooperative model, right? So we grouped them into clusters, and what we did to ensure that we didn't lose women in the process was to ensure that for every group that had a man as a leader, a woman was made a deputy or assistant leader, just so that we're able to also ensure that we're able to capture the voices of women in the entire process. And so we mapped them out, and that's where we also did that to distribute them onto the different clusters of land that they were going to be farming on. This also helped us because we knew the number of people we're working with, the number of products that we needed or the groups that were taking product loans, and basically just helped us to keep control of everything that was going on. Plus, it took away from us the need to have to chase all these farmers one by one. So once you have a leader, that leader is responsible for everybody in that cluster, and basically that's how we were able to move from there. After doing that, of course, we went into best practices training for them. We noticed that a lot of them were planting cassava, but didn't necessarily know, what they really needed to use to plant cassava, the proper planting methods, the kind of inputs to use. A lot of them had never used high quality inputs, for their cassava farming before then. And so what we did was, of course, because we're in partnership with AFEX, we were able to get staff from AFEX to actually come give proper trainings to the farmers that we were working with. And then after that, we did the input disbursement, which was the product loan. So we didn't give money, like I said, we gave them stems, we gave them inputs in terms of fertilizers and the other things that they needed. And then we went into planting, and then we had other periodic trainings. So another thing that was important to us was ensuring that the people we were working with were financially included. And so we partnered with another microfinance bank to be able to take financial literacy trainings to the community we were working with, and also open bank accounts for them. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that we did with them was to sign a profit sharing agreement with them. And we wanted to ensure that we were able to keep track of the monies coming in and out. So we needed those bank accounts to be able to actually send the monies back to these farmers that we were working with. So that was one of the things that we did at that time as well. And of course, now we're Harvests and Markets currently harvesting. Well, I think we finalized harvesting last week. So it's been a entire process. Just to share some of the journey in pictures. First picture, this is when we were doing some community mapping. If you see the second picture, that's my co-founder and I. We actually went into communities that were processing Gary with their hands and had some time, sharing in that experience as well. And of course, a lot of community engagements, trainings. If you see the fourth picture on the slide, that's where we actually have where we were, signing the agreements with some of these community members that we were working with. The next is, the training materials that we put together to ensure that even after we left, they had something to go back to. So one of the things that we did was we gave the training in Hausa because, that's the language that they understood. So we gave the training in Hausa and in English, and the booklets were also in Hausa and English as well. And then, of course, bringing, the stems into the community, bringing the inputs into the community and sharing. And then, of course, going to the point where we're now currently harvesting and sending harvest to processors who need cassava at the time. Lessons learned. So what we did was, because we were able to introduce high quality inputs to this community, we realized that we were able to take their harvest from 1x to 3x. So we literally tripled the amount of cassava that was coming out per hectare in that community. And a lot of them are now open and willing to use high quality inputs going forward, because they've seen that, there's a difference when you actually use inputs for your cassava. A lot of them were just planting on, normal ground without having the understanding of what inputs could actually do. And so a lot of them were actually planting cassava because it was a feeding thing just for them. It wasn't a market, element for them. They just wanted to plant cassava, make their garis in their homes, and just be able to feed themselves. But because we're able to improve the quantity of yield that came out per hectare, they've been able to see that they can actually become a business on their own. Community, have binding community contracts with the communities is so important, because towards the end they start getting really stubborn. I promise you, it wasn't all rosy. They start getting really stubborn, and when it got to the point where we had to actually harvest, that's when we saw another part of the community. So we ended up spending so much more money in actually the labor of harvesting the cassava, and then in the logistics. So you need to be very clear on what kind of vehicles and the capacities of these vehicles, right? So sometimes a processor needs maybe 50 or 120, 100 tons or more. And then you go and get a small pickup. You end up using more money, because each pickup you will pay for every time the pickup is there. If you don't have the right kind of labor, you will end up using more time to actually harvest the cassava, and you spend more money on labor, because if they sleep there overnight, you have to pay them. So if they don't finish when they're supposed to be done, then you actually have to pay for that as well. And then markets, which is the most important. You have to have your sales channels ready before harvest. So this is one of the things that we did right from the moment we planted. We realized that we needed to go and start finding markets for cassava. Some of them we signed partnerships with or signed agreements with, some we didn't. And they'll just tell you when your cassava is ready, come. But luckily we were able to find people who were willing to buy the cassava at good prices. That's another thing, is sometimes you might get a price, but then the day you're actually delivering, the price of the cassava may have fallen or may have gone up. So those were some of the things that we learned in the cycle of the entire process. Now, where are the pitfalls? The entire value chain. I'll just talk through a bit about the activities in the entire value chain of cassava. There's the inbound logistics. Inbound logistics is whatever logistics you're using to bring in the inputs, your stems, whatever it is that you need to go into the land before planting or during planting, right? There's the operations part of it, which is, processing. Who are you processing on the land, or are you processing around the where you have your farmland, or are you processing away from it, right? What kind of processing exactly are you doing? And there's the outbound logistics, where of course you have to move cassava from the farms to wherever it is that wherever it is that the processing needs to be done. And then there's sales, and there's the other service. I just want to speak a bit more about the outbound logistics, because this is where the major pitfalls are. Now, a lot of these communities, like I mentioned, you actually go into agreements with them before, but when it is time to harvest, you find that they become really stubborn. And a lot of them will actually then get to the point where they begin to harvest behind your back, and you don't know what's going on. So I think for me, it's extremely important, and this is where this is where the money is actually, right? I mean, for us, this was the well, the most tricky part of it was the outbound logistics, and it's definitely something that you need to look out for. There are several products of cassava, depending on where you want to play along the value chain, which is where, the processing and that's the major focus of where we are now as a company. So what we've done is, because we've been able to see where the issues are, we're now deciding to pivot a bit into technique, because we want to be able to show how do we get to the point where we're able to support these farmers to be able to move their cassava out of the farmland to the processors that actually need it, because we saw that was where most of the issues were coming from. They don't have access to the processors, or they don't have access to markets. They also don't have access to the logistics that needs to be done, to move their cassava out. And you find that a lot of them end up losing cassava because the cassava is just in the farmland. So the thing with cassava is you cannot harvest until you're ready to process, because the life cycle of cassava is really short, right? Once you begin to lose moisture, you begin to lose the quality of the cassava itself. And so you find that a lot of them lose money or lose cassava and end up just processing for their homes, and they're not able to actually, make money from that part of it. So we've seen that, the processing end of the cassava value chain is the diciest part of it, but it's also the most profitable part of it. So if you're able to actually get control of that part of the cassava value chain, then you've been able to get it right. And I think for us, that's where we are right now as an organization, because we've realized that we need to, where the most issue is where we need to provide some solutions for them. So they've gotten a hang of farming, they've gotten a hang of what kind of inputs that they actually need and the quantity of inputs they need. We've taken them through the entire process of best, planting and processes for cassava, and how they need to space and all of that on the farmland. But after farming, what next, right? And so we've been able to move from that, and now we're beginning to work with a few of them also to be able to process this cassava from cassava itself to gari and flour, to be able to increase the shelf life of the cassava for themselves. Because I mean, once you do the processing, you've increased the shelf life, you've increased the life cycle of the product, and then you can move on to to other things. So that's where we are now, moving into tech, trying to connect logistics and farmers to be able to get to the processors. So we're designing a unique product that connects processors and farmers and logistics, so it's both ways. The farmer gets access to processors get access to farmers, because we found that that's where we actually do need to deploy more capital to be able to support people who want to, or especially women though, who want to or are already playing in that value end of the cassava. Stella, if you could please move to the last slide, I think, just to get a sense of, so what we saw is only 9.6% of female smallholder farmers can transport their produce from farm to market. So this is actually a picture from our processing. I'm sorry, from our harvesting. So you can see the woman, that's how they actually transport the cassava from the farmlands to the vehicles that actually then move them out of, the farmlands. And also depending on the kind of farmland, you might need two different types of truck. One moves it out of the farmland, which is a smaller truck, and then moves it to where the bigger truck is, and then you transport. All of that is money, right? We also saw that 32.7% of farmers and 86.8% of produce merchants don't own any form of transport, so they can't get it. And of course, drivers, once they know that you're desperate, will definitely take advantage of you. And of course, buying a truck is expensive. It's not something that they can even invest in at that point in time. And then, the less access to off-takers or bigger clientele. So they end up just selling, even if they sell at the marketplaces, and they're not able to actually gain more money for their products. And of course, because you know that the value of cassava drops with every day it's out of the farm, you want to quickly sell and move out of there. So yeah, I think this has been the experience so far. It's been a really interesting experience working in the cassava value chain. It's very tricky. It's a tricky value chain, but it's one that, if done right, can be highly profitable as well. So most of the work that we're trying to do now is around the processing end of it. And we're also in the process of registering a few products that will get on the shelves, a few cassava products that will also be hitting the shelves very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rainy, for that very insightful and informative presentation. Please, if you have any questions, please use the chat box function and they will be attended to at the end of both presentations. And now to our second speaker for today. Atinike Lebele is the co-founder and CEO of Cattle Foods. She'll be sharing her experiences with cassava production and processing. Atinike, you have the floor, please.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Stella. Please confirm that you can hear my voice.
Hear you perfectly. I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Like Stella said, my name is Atinuke, and I'll be sharing part of my experience. And thank you, Madam Wayne, for your experiences, for sharing your experience. I was just nodding my head when you were talking. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Okay, so we'll be talking about the cassava overview, the challenges when it comes to the post-harvest losses of cassava, and some of the solutions that we've been able to imbibe as a company, and also like a recommendation that can also be done. Things that we've not done, but as a recommendation that maybe the government or anybody on this platform can also take on to reduce the post-harvest losses of cassava. Okay, so I work with Cattle Food. So Cattle Food is a food processing company that 80% of our raw materials is actually cassava. We process this into different value chain. I'm a processor. I'm also a farmer anyways. And we also work with farmer that we're able to form into clusters. We call them our outgrower farmers. Just like what Madam Waymi said, you cannot really work with farmers if you don't have them in clusters or in cooperatives. So we also do that in our own company. So we've been able to sector farmers that are working in our area of jurisdiction into clusters that can be an outgrower farmers for us. So at the moment, we're working with over 500 farmers that cultivate at least 2 acres per farmer. But basically, we also work majorly with the pro vitamin cassava, that's the yellow cassava. So I know that the white cassava is common, but we also work with the yellow cassava, which is kind of the niche that we also built for ourselves in the cassava value chain. And I also work with a team of about 5. We all have over 15 years experience in cassava value chain, and yeah, and that is one of the things I've been able to help us to grow. So let us look at the cassava overview as a whole. Just like I will just add some points from what Mrs. Moyimi said. Cassava is ranked as one of the stable crops that we have, and looking at the fact that even virtually every home, 6 out of every 10 homes in Nigeria feed on cassava in one way or the other every day. If you don't feed on gari, you feed on nafun, you feed on just product from cassava. And now that even companies are also coming into the cassava value chain, to use that as a base for their production. So yeah, so it's made us even one of the major cultivator of cassava. And Nigeria at the moment cultivates over 56 million tons. And if we look at things that have been cultivated, 84% of that 56 million tons goes to Gary. And that is done locally, and 75 of that goes to Gary. And that is why Gary will never need advertisement. Gary is everywhere. Everybody knows what Gary is. But even for the fact that we are the major cultivator of cassava, about 35% of what is being cultivated even still go to waste, which is our major staple food. So how do we even address the post-harvest loss of this cassava that that major staple crop? Because we are preaching food security, but how do we even make it secured, even if majority of what we cultivate goes to waste? So we have to look for a way of mitigating this loss, and what are the major things that even cause this waste at the end of the day. So now, inadequate access to market. Yes, so I get, talking from experience, so I get a lot of people calling, oh, I have cassava in this location, I want to sell, I don't have market for it. And my first question to them is, why do you have to cultivate cassava if you don't have markets for it? Because if you ask a young person coming into agriculture right now and they tell what do you want to cultivate, they will tell you, oh, want to do cassava. And my question will be, where is your market? Yes, so I think access to market is one of the major things that causes post-harvest losses when it comes to cassava and cassava value chain. Most of these farmers don't have access to market for their cultivation. And that is why some of this goes to waste at the end of the day. And some even have to harvest without even knowing where to sell, take it to the market. And we know that cassava is one of the fast deteriorating crop that we have. So once you harvest cassava, it starts deteriorating, like it starts setting in. Even by the time you don't process the first day, the second day, then you start seeing cassava getting darkish inside and everything. So the starch content even starts to reduce, right? So yeah, that's one of the major things. So access to market is one of the major things that causes post-harvest losses when there is no access to the major markets that you want to set to, right? Then 6 timeline challenges. There are a lot of people, as I said, a lot of people harvest their cassava and take it to the market or take it to a major place that they feel they can sell there. But the major challenge is by the time that nobody's able to offtake that cassava at that present moment, then what happened? A lot of deterioration starts setting in. It takes time. If you're not able to sell the first time, the second time, the third time, the first time, in the first day, the second day, the third day, then what happened? The cassava starts getting rotten. Speaking from the processor view right now, it starts getting rotten. In fact, you won't be able to get the good quality of product from that cassava. So the 6 time is a major thing, because the 6 time even account for about 96%. Because if you don't sell at the right time to sell your cassava, then start getting bad, right? And then another thing is lack of access of good roads. We know that most of these farmers plant in a long distance, even from the town. The farms are quite far. Farming distance is far. Now, if they're unable to get good road access for them to be able to convey that product from the farm to the market, then what happens? That is why some farmers will tell you, oh, my cassava is on the farm, is wasted. I don't have transportation system to convey this products, or there's no good access to convey this products even to the market. Just like what Mrs. McWayne said, most of the women she works with, they have to carry the cassava on their head to take to the major road or to get it to where the vehicle are for them to be able to get to the market. Now, tell me, how many cassava would they put on their head to take to the major road and they won't get tired, right? So, yeah, so access to major is one of the access to road is one of the major challenges that we have that causes post-harvest losses in cassava. Then about 61% loss during the dry season. Yeah, so we have a lot of challenges of cassava during dry season, because by the time you tell farmers that, oh, okay, I need cassava, harvest cassava, give me cassava, and the next thing, oh, it is dry season, the ground is hard, I cannot harvest by this period and everything. And so what the farmer failed to understand is, yes, we understand from their perspective that it is dry season, it is very difficult to uproot and all that. But what they don't also understand is the longer your cassava stays in the ground, the longer it starts deteriorating. Because by the time it uses more than a year, maybe 2 years, 1.5 years, 2 years, if you harvest your cassava, you start seeing something like a foam, like a fiber inside the cassava. And for us as a processor, we won't buy that type of cassava because the starch content is drastically reduced at that time, and we will not even be able to get as much as product outcome from that cassava at the time. So that period of dry season is a very critical period. That yes, cassava is quite very expensive at that period. But at the same time, if a farmer is unable to uproot and they're leaving to when the next rain starts, for them to uproot easily, what they fail to understand also is deteriorating that cassava starts getting stored in the soil, right? So that is even one of the major reasons why we have some major losses. Because if you bring that kind of cassava to me, I might not be able to buy. And that is why cassava is always very expensive in dry season, right? And yes, as expensive as it is in dry season, there are still some small processors that will not be able to afford the price of cassava at that period. And that is why we have low outcome of products at the period of dry season. Yeah, so then farmers not being able to meet the buyer specification is also very important. And that is why some of these farmers are not able to sell. And that is why we have losses. I always encourage farmers, if you're operating in a certain location, it is best for you to locate the industries that can take your cassava in those locations, because it will help you to understand what that factory or what that industry wants. Just yesterday, I was hearing about a factory processed into starch, and most of the cassava they get from the environment are low in starch content. So they are even unable to offtake from those farmers because it won't give them a good output. So even the farmers are complaining that they are not able to sell, not because the processor does not want to buy from you, but because you're not planting to this buyer specification. So I always advise, look at what they want. Look at the factories in your location. Look at what they want and plant what they want, so that you won't be at the end of the day looking for market for cassava that you can easily sell in your location. So as a cassava farmer, if you want to sell your cassava, have access to market, look at industries within your environment and look at what quality of cassava do they want, then you can plant. And even when the processors see that you're planting to their specification, it will also be easy for them to assist you, to give you raw materials, because you're planting what they want, right? The lack of basic processing and storage facilities in the rural areas. Yes, most of these farmers live in rural areas, but most of them do not even have access to little processing centers. Just like what Mrs. Wayne was saying that they want to do for their farmers. Let's have small modular centers in that location. They are not processing centers that they can process their cassava that can help them even to mitigate some of the losses. So lack of small processing, just basic processing units that can help them process this cassava even to a goods, to a semi-production that they can now supply, even if they cannot sell at that present moment, but they can process into even for their families, even for their local markets. But most of these farmers, it is quite expensive for them. So once they're unable to sell and unable to process, then what happens? Some of them leave it on the farm and said, oh, I'm not cultivating cassava anymore because I can't sell, and losses setting. And looking at the cassava being our major staple crops that we have in Nigeria. Then another waste that also come in, and that where we have post-harvest loss is also from waste from processing. As a processor can categorically say this, the lot of waste that's been incurred, especially in peeling. See, you can control your peeling when you have, let's say, a peeling machine that will remove the outside part of your cassava. But if you're engaging rural people to peel for you, it's very difficult because by the time they are peeling off some of the flesh off. They are peeling some of the flesh, some of the cassava off. You can only tell them, but you cannot be there 24/7 even to monitor that. Right? And also, when you're not taking cassava at the right time, you want to process, let's say you want to process 10 tons, and you know your factory has the capacity to process 5 tons in a day. Why not take it daily, like 5 tons that day, process the 5 tons in it? Because by the time you're leaving it for the next 2 or 3 days, then waste starts coming in. Losses can start setting in that cassava at that specific moment. Then waste from peels. As much as we peel cassava a lot in this part of the country. Now, let me shock you, from 56 million tons of waste, you can get about 50 million tons of animal feed from that 50 million tons. Right, that is why we have a lot of companies now coming into cassava waste for animal feed. Because as much as we are throwing off those waste away, it's a waste. It's a post-harvest waste, which this waste can also be turned into animal feed. So I think there should be a lot of education around that, because these cereal processors do not know that it's something that can also be turned to waste for them. But to them, it's a waste. For us in our own factory, our peels, in fact, before the peels get to the ground, the people that are ready to take it are already on the ground to buy it for animal feed. It can be used for pig, can be used for even poultry. Yes, can be used, because these peels contain a lot of fiber, a lot of vitamins, a lot of crude fibers in that can also be used for animal feed. So if we're not taking if we're not looking at this, it's also a waste of post-harvest losses for cassava. And how do we mitigate these losses? I'll be speaking more from the processor view right now. And the first thing that is have good roads, access to good roads. And a selling major point for cassava farmers. If the farmer that Mrs. Wayne work with have a selling point, it is good that as they're transporting from the farm, they're getting to that point. Processors know the point where they take the cassava from, and even if possible for them to have market days for the cassava offtakes. Oh, in every 2 days, we'll be having cassava at this point. The processors know where to get there. Even if they don't have farmers that they work with, they'll be able to session their production to those dates of selling points that can also take their cassava from. If the processor have their inbound logistics, just like what Mrs. Wayne explained, inbound and outbound logistics is actually very important when it comes to cassava value chain and when it comes to reducing post-harvest losses in cassava. It is very, very, very important. And also can have collaboration with transport companies, like what we do in cattle foods. We have collaborations with some transport companies that we work with, that even from time to time, we even go there to even train them on how they could even undo and transport well for this cassava, because we also want to produce good products, and good products start from the cassava, the input you are putting into the product. So we have collaboration with transport companies, that even as a cassava farmer that you can have collaboration with these transport companies. Yeah, there are some times that they want to take advantage of you, but if you can create a collaboration with them, it's something that can help you a lot. Then batch processing for processors. Like I said, if you want to process 10 tons of cassava, and you know that your processing unit is only having a capacity of 5 tons per day, why not take that 5 tons and process, then get cassava for the next day? Because by the time you're not processing the whole 10 tons, like I said, waste starts coming in, losses start coming in, losses from your own income, losses from the output that you're getting from the cassava. So batch processing is always very, very, very important for us to be able to mitigate losses in processing. So take what you can produce at a time. Look at the capacity of your processing center and take what you can produce at a time. That will also help us to reduce waste when it comes to processing. And also, having modular processing centers, it is very good if you're working with farmers and if they're in a very the location is actually very far from where you are, let us have a modular center, a small processing unit. They don't need so much. It might not be just one fryer, one cassava press, and they're good. You don't want to process to Gary, they are good because the people in the location will also serve as the people peeling the cassava, but we can have small modular centers in different locations in the rural areas where they can process into small, it can be even a semi-processing unit. It can be a semi-processing unit that the process is okay for you. All you have to do is to go take it and bring it into your factory. So having those small modular centers in those locations or in those areas where the farmers are, we also help them to reduce their losses. Even if there is no access to good road, if there is no access to market, but they can process into some basic goods, into fufu, it is easy. So fufu, they don't really even need so much. All they need for fufu is to get the fermenting tank and access to water for them to be able to process. Then mobile processing units. This might be it's a cost, very cost, it's not cost effective, but it's something that if one or two major processors can come together, or even government can help in a particular farming operation can do, have a mobile processing unit. A mobile processing unit is like a vehicle that goes to the farm and process the cassava on the farm. It peels the cassava, it washes the cassava, it grates the cassava, and you put it in your bags and you bring it back to your factory. And that also helps to reduce the waste of your cassava because it will have been processed into a particular product, into mash. Cassava, let me use cassava mash majorly. And if you are processing into flour, you will have been able to do cake. But then you have an hydraulic press, process into cake that is not just the cake that you bring to your factory to process into flour. So that will also help to reduce cost of transportation. That will have to remove access to good road and access to market because that machine will be able to process into a semi product for you. Yeah, so that will also help to reduce the waste around cassava. And also on farm semi-processing strategies, just like what I explained earlier, you can have a semi-processing unit on the farm for the farmers. Then to process into a certain major semi-goods that you can now transport into your factory. Then farmers education. Farmers education is actually very important. And I like what Mrs. Fanway is also doing with our farmers. They're educating them on the best way to plant, the best time to harvest, and how they can go about it. Farmers education is also very important. Farmers education for them to also know the landscape and everything that they can cultivate their cassava on, and also to be able to plant to their consumers' specification. It is very important. For what we do for our own agri farmers, we have extension agent for them that goes to these farms and also educates them on the best way they can cultivate to our own specification, which is very, very important. And finally, extensive product development. If you have people working on research and seeing how we can produce more products from cassava, that we can, apart from the gari, the fufu, the flour, the starch, let us also have product that we can also, more product that we can also produce from cassava. Just like the last slide that we have custard. That is cassava-based custard. It is custard just like your normal custard, but it is made from cassava, from the right made cassava. So if we have more product that we can also make from cassava, it also helps us to reduce the loss in cassava. And yeah, thank you for your time. And thank you for having me. I think with that, we've been able to see how we can mitigate the losses that we incur from cassava processing. Thank you so much for having me, Stella. And over to you.
Thank you, Atunike. That was a very insightful and informative session. So now we're going to go into Q&A. We don't have much time left. We have just 4 minutes before it's actually 11. So my question for both speakers is with the floods ravaging various states, um, how can this value chain survive this natural disaster that is taking place currently? And what would your advice be to local farmers on how to preserve this particular value chain? I will start with Ms. Weni, please.
Thank you for that, Stella. I think that's a very, very interesting question. I think that's where education comes in. And when I say that, I mean education in terms of insurance, because a lot of farmers don't understand that you can actually insure your farm produce, right? Um, so I think for the first thing will be one, we need to begin to preach the message of insurance for farmers. As in, we need to take that message out because these are natural disasters that you really cannot control. I think the other thing I'll respond to that is the issue of where we now need to deploy more capital towards processing. Just like, everyone has heard on the conversation between myself and Atinuke, it's been that the processing end of it, that's where it's dicey, but that's where, you can also extend the shelf life. The longer the cassava remains on the ground, the longer that, they're not able to process, even when you bring it out of the ground, you're losing money, you're losing opportunity with that cassava. So I think we need to deploy more money into the processing end of things, to the several various products of cassava that are available, and also begin to encourage and train more women and more people to go into that processing end of things. That's the only way that we can extend, so that people are able to mop up, a lot of the farm produce that they have, and we're able to actually get that into processing and extend the shelf life in whatever product ways. For me, I think those would be the two major things that, off the top of my head, I would say would be a solution to that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Atinuke, what's your take on this?
Okay, so I will talk majorly from the primary production aspect. Farmers education is actually very important when it comes to site selection for your cassava, or for even any crops that you want to cultivate to be able to avoid this disaster. You have to ensure the proper site selection for your cassava. And also do not plant in a waterlogged. When you know that a place is waterlogged, or if it has the potential of being lodged with water, do not plant there, and do not plant in extremely low land areas to avoid such disaster. Then, like you said, subscribe for insurance. Insurance is actually very important. Like most farmers do not do that. And it's also very good to work in cooperatives, so that even when things happen, you've been able to come together and be able to see how you can work together. Then processing. I think it is high time Nigeria as a whole start looking at cassava chips as a major thing to do, because every year China's request for tons of cassava chips from us. We've not been able, for the fact that we are the major cassava producer, we've not been able to meet up with that standard. So if you're looking at processing into chips, I think that will also help us to preserve cassava even when in season, even when you have it. Just so we have to look more into processing, excessive product development, and also production of cassava chips to be able to preserve cassava for a very long time. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Atinuke. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of it. I see conversations going on in the chat, but there are no questions per se. So thank you all for your time. Please feel free to contact our speakers for any follow-up questions. There are details and this presentation slides for both speakers and from GIZ, from Gabriel, will be emailed to all participants. The webinar recording will be on our AHK YouTube channel, and the recording will be uploaded before the end of the week. Thanks again to our speakers for taking time to address us and share such helpful information. Thank you to Gabriel from SDG Market Building Initiative by GIZ for being part of this webinar series. Until the next time, do enjoy the rest of your day and goodbye.